Before we begin, I want to welcome Leah Dallas from L, sitting on behalf of City Monterey, and Dan Schreiner for MCWD. And I believe it's 2 o'clock, so please, if you would stand for Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Maria, may we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Mr. O'Connell. We'll begin with our voting members. County Monterey Supervisor Jane Parker, Supervisor Dave Potter. He's getting here. Thank you. Supervisor John Phillips. City of Del Rio Oaks Mayor Jerry Eaglin. Council Member Gail Morton. City of Monterey Council Member Ed Smith. City of Seaside Mayor Ralph Rubio.
Here.
And Mayor Pro Tem Ian Oglesby. Thank you. City of San City Mayor David Pendergrass. City of Salinas Mayor Gunter.
Here.
City of Pacific Grove Council Member, Mayor Bill Kemp. He's not here. City of Carmel by the Sea, Mayor Steve Dallas. And moving on to the ex officio, the 20th Congressional District, and everybody from that group, they're not here at the moment. I'll mark them absent. Transportation Agency of Monterey County, Debbie Hale. Hadmock or Hank Myers, not here. MPUSD, Dan Albert Jr. University of California, Santa Cruz, Donna Blitzer. Thank you. California State University, Monterey Bay, President Ochoa. We don't have representatives from the U.S. Army or Fort Ord, BRAC. Moving on to Monterey Peninsula College, Vicky Nakamura. Oh, I was told that none of them will be here. Thank you. I'm sorry about that. Fort Ord, base realignment and closure, Bill Collins. Thank you. Monterey Peninsula College, Vicky Nakamura. Monterey Salinas Transit, Lisa Reinheimer. Thank you. And Marina Coast Water District, Jan Schreiner. Chair O'Connell, you do have a quorum.
Thank you very much. We'll go to acknowledgements and announcements. Michael?
Yes, Chair O'Connell, I think we can start with the board's consideration of a resolution acknowledging Graham Bice for his 25 years of active work at the former Fort Ord. That resolution is included in your packet. It was presented to him in draft at his retirement party 2 days ago.
Any questions on that? Go out to the public. Any questions on the resolution? Second thoughts? Bring it back. Could I have a motion, please?
Second.
Moved by Board Member Morton and second by Board Member Rubio. No comments. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Any other announcement?
Yes, another announcement and acknowledgement. President Ochoa and his crew at the California State University Monterey Bay did the Startup Challenge last week. Actually, that was the culmination of months and months of work, including a variety of meetings at CSUMB and other locations, including the FORA Community Information Center. The end result was well publicized in the local press. In fact, an 11-year-old from Carmel Valley won one of the major awards and major effort to do small business enhancement in this region in a very successful way. I wanted to point that out. FORA supported that in a big way, and FORA's logo was right on the back of all of the programs that were distributed. Chair, if I could, I would like to also point out that the 14-day public review of the draft Regional Urban Design Guidelines begins next Monday. All of you at the board level and the full public will be able to access the draft Regional Urban Design Guidelines on the FORA website starting Monday. Regional Urban Design Guidelines Task Force voted unanimously 2 days ago to start that public period, as they believe that the draft is ready for that review. Once that review is complete, it will come back to staff, barring extraordinary or significant comments. That will come back to the board for consideration at its June meeting. Certainly, we will have a report to the board at the June meeting. Chair, those are the only announcements and acknowledgements I have.
Thank you very much. We will go to consent agenda. There are 3 action items in this, 5A, C, and E, and information items, B and D. Any member on the board have any questions or desire to pull any one of those items? Seeing none, we'll go out to the public. Anyone in the public? Any comments or desire to pull? Seeing none, we'll bring it back, and I'll entertain a motion on the consent agenda. It's been moved by Board Member Rubio and seconded by Board Member Parker, I believe. Any comments? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. Certainly. Aye. 2 abstain.
On the minutes.
On the minutes only. Okay. That's Board Member Dallas as well. Thank you. And actually Board Member Schreiner. That's right.
Schreiner.
Eventually we'll get all of them. She doesn't have a vote. So forget. I got to learn this. I guess I'm in the service 3rd year. No thanks. Okay. 6A, please. Consider adoption of the FORA fiscal year 2016-17 annual budget. Michael, please.
Yes, Chair O'Connell and members of the board will have a PowerPoint presentation to provide you with an overview of the budget. Please understand that this budget is typically provided in May of each year. That gives the board members an opportunity to review it. It is typically reviewed by the Finance Committee, which did review it during the month of April, sometimes even earlier in March. I think the initial drafts go out in March. And typically, this annual budget is done in coordination with the CIP and with other components of the budget. This particular year, the fiscal year budget is going to precede the CIP and the salary survey, both authorized by the board, since they will not be available till July, and we will need to have a fiscal year budget adopted prior to June 30. I point that out, and we would rather not have a continuing resolution as our colleagues inside the Potomac do. So there are items in here that have been reviewed by the Finance Committee and the Executive Committee. I'll mention those as we go through. This budget does itemize the $27 million that's designated for specific purposes by this board, and $7.5 million that's an unassigned fund balance. We'll point out where those are. A significant part of that $7.5 million comes from a carryover from building removal. This also includes this year a $400,000 payment to reduce our liabilities, our unaudited liabilities with the pension fund, and it also includes a full staffing of the 16 positions authorized by the board. It's the first time we've had this number. It's typically been limited to 14, but we've added 2 in the last 2.5 years. So this particular summary provides both revenues and expenditures and shows that the ending balance is going to be about $35 million, roughly $1 million in expenditures over revenues in the coming year. The next slide will give us an idea of where we are with revenues, and then I'll contrast how that works with the expenditures. Again, I'm pointing out and highlighting for you the fact that developer fees, land sale proceeds, are both items that are going to be coming out of the CIP, and actual numbers are not certain yet. These are simply projections from the CIP from the FY 15-16 year. So that may be adjusted as the board makes other decisions. Also, in terms of property tax payments, that's an item that's subject to changes and increases. As all of you know, we've had a significant amount of construction over the last several years. As those properties get onto the tax rolls, it changes the tax revenues received by FORA. So this is simply a projection at this point. It may be a bit higher than that or maybe a bit lower. And going on to expenditures, again, salaries and benefits, that $2.9 million figure is different for some important reasons. This is the unaudited liability. Payment is included in that, and at the recommendation of the Executive Committee, it includes a 3% COLA for staff. There is a specific breakdown in your individual packets on that 3% COLA impact, which is about 60,000, just slightly less than 60,000 of this amount, and is recommended by the executive committee. And then also, there's a $6.5 million in capital improvement program budgeted items on this list. $1 million for, in the second column over under Lisa's land sale, is for building removal. We anticipate spending that this year. It could be more. It just depends on what the CIP decides to push forward and how quickly we can move ahead with our building removal obligations in surplus 2, which the board has as a priority. And then the $5.5 million remaining is going to pretty much be subject to what the CIP says to you. This is simply, again, a projection of what capital improvements will be. But the board has already authorized a portion of this to go for support of the Pure Water project and a couple of other items. We can talk about those in more detail if that's the desire of the board. And so finally, our overall budget, we show where the balance and reserves are. If you look at the bottom line, the general fund has about 11 million in contributing to that end fund balance, about 11 million that come from leases, land sale revenues. A significant part of this is an outgrowth of the final resolution of the Preston Park transfer to Marina. And the final column, CFD taxes. Now that fund reserve is not money that you have to spend unless you were to alter policies. Just to remind you, a significant amount of the developer fees goes toward the habitat conservation program. There's a $9 million item there that we keep in reserve. It's the board's commitment that 30 cents on the dollar goes to that. And so that's roughly what that $9,800,000 is. Under the other categories, the board has a policy of holding aside the potential of operations need over the coming years as a reserve. And the CalPERS termination, there's also a significant amount the board has set aside for that as FORA moves toward the transition in 2020. So while there's $35 million in reserve that's there at the end of the year, some of this you've already made decisions about where it goes. And so my last slide says, this is the request.
Thank you, Michael. Any board member have any questions? Board Member Morton?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Hulamart, for going through that. My question is, when does the salary survey, when is that anticipated to come back to the board?
Helen?
We're anticipating that salary survey to be completed by the end of June. We have spoken to our consultant, and they're in the process of working that right now, but I believe some of it is going through member jurisdictions for their survey first before they can compile that. We're looking to probably present it over to the Finance Committee. I think when Robert and I last spoke, we were looking at the June board meeting. Thank you.
I think that's July.
Possibly July. Board meeting, I'm sorry. Finance Committee in June.
Any other questions, board members? Yes, Board Member Ochoa.
I just was wondering about the line on page 34, the agenda, line item CIP projects. It's over 5 million, and I don't see it broken out anywhere.
Steve, could you outline the CIP projects in the 5.45 million?
So on page 34, and you're talking about the CIP projects at the bottom. So in the FY 16-17 year, the 5.5 million, where would those go? So 30% of that would be a habitat conservation fund. So that was the $9.8 million fund you saw on the screen. So roughly 30% of that 5.5 would go into that fund. The remaining would be split between water augmentation and road projects or CIP, other projects in the CIP. Those are the two main ones. The or augmentation in road projects.
Any other questions by board members? Seeing none, we'll go out to the public. Anyone in the public have any questions or comments relating to consideration of adopting this fiscal 2016-14 budget? Seeing none, we'll close public comment, bring it back for entertain a motion.
Well, you may not. Let me just say, I would like to make a motion to approve the fiscal year budget with the 2016-17 annual budget and defer the 3% cost of living adjustment until after receipt of the salary study.
Do we have a second on that? It dies for lack of a second. Can
Now
I?
you can.
Second. Board Member Gunter is asked to approve it as set forth in the staff report, and it's been seconded by Mayor Rubio. Any comments relating to this from any board member? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. 6B is the Oak Woodland Conservation Selection of Consultant. This is a second vote. We nicely beat this up last meeting, but is there any member of the board who has any questions relating to this before we go out to the public? Seeing none, we'll go out to the public. Is there any member of the public has any comments relating to the Oakland Woodland Conservation Selection of a Consultant?
I'd like to know, this is Levon Stone, Executive Director of FORA Environmental Justice Network. I'd like to know who they are, where they're from, how much.
Is that your entire question?
And what are they supposed to do?
Anything else?
Waiting on an answer, so.
Thank you. We need
I'm sorry,
to know
could you repeat,
yes, who they
please
are,
repeat,
where they're from, and
Who they are, where they're from, what are they expected to do in our community, and how do we interact with what is happening with the consultants?
The consultant is Denise Duffy and Associates, and they're located out of Monterey. So they are, a local consulting firm on it. And part of their process is to work not only with staff, FORA staff, but also the team with the city of Seaside, the county of Monterey, and also the California Department of Veterans Affairs to work on a draft oak woodlands plan, both plan itself and an area map. In addition, the consultant will do an extensive outreach to the community to garner information and public participation in the process. That's exactly what this project will do and precisely what the consultant will be leading.
thank you, Mr. Lopez. Any other public comments? Seeing none, we'll close public comment, bring it back, entertain a motion, please, for the second vote. Moved by Board Member Rubio and second by Board Member Medellin. Board Member Rubio evidently wants to get out of here early because I've yet to ask for a motion to be finished, and he starts talking about it. So, any comment? You got him. I'm slow. I've been told that. Okay. Any comments about the motion?
Just one comment?
Yes, please.
I wasn't here last time, so I didn't get to weigh in, but I agreed with the previous recommendation for the other consultants, so I'll be voting no on the motion.
Okay. All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? 2 noes, Board Member Morton and Board Member Parker. Thank you. We will now go to 6C, Water Augmentation Planning Process, Authorized Execution of a 3-party Memorandum of Understanding. Please realize that the other 2 agencies have already approved this, and this is coming to us for our approval. And Michael, who will be
Yes, Chair O'Connell, members of the board, this board has discussed the water augmentation program 3 of the 5 meetings this year. This will be the 4th out of the 5 meetings this year. This has been discussed in past several meetings. This 3-party effort has been underway for the last several weeks, culminating in the document that you received earlier. That document has also been circulated to the boards of the other 2 members of the 3-party planning. There's also a letter that was received by the board, and there's a copy of that letter that was provided outside, and Peter Said will do this presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Hulamard, members of the board. Like Mr. Hulamard said, we've been presenting this for a while, so I'm going to kind of run through the background real quickly. This is a graphic showing the already approved regional augmentation water project. That project, as many of you know, has been a hybrid project from the beginning. One portion is the recycled and the other portion is other, as we have up there. The recycled portion has come before you before. We have, the board has already approved the executive officer to negotiate an agreement with MCWD concerning the pipeline or the trunk line. And that currently might look like something like $6 million over 4 years of reimbursement. The other project is what we're looking at today. We're looking at this silo solely, and that silo has to do with the 3-party planning and an MOU to help govern that. The MOU is something that will study alternatives and establish a technical advisory group. A little bit on the background, as many of you know, 2,400 acre-feet of water was applied by the BRP early in the process. In 2007, we allocated 1427 to the jurisdictions so that they have that available to them. There's a remaining 973 acre-feet, and that is what this other portion is that we need to look at as part of the regional water augmentation project. In November of last year, a presentation was made to this board about an all-of-the-above solution. You might be familiar with that term. It consists of recycle, desalination, and conservation efforts, a possible study of the different augmentation methods. Then again in December, we received approval for an MOA, Memorandum of Agreement, for a 3-party planning effort. And with that approval came budget approval for up to $157,000 on this particular planning effort. Let me talk a little bit about the terms of the MOU. The MOU has been provided in your packet, and you're welcome to read through it to get more detail. This is more of a high-level view. Basically, the MOU is set up to study the remaining augmentation alternatives. That study will be equally funded by the 3 agencies, FORA, MCWD, and PCA, with FORA already authorized to contribute up to $157,000. We will likely not spend that amount of money on the initial study. It'll probably be much lower. The third aspect or term of the MOU is that we would establish a technical advisory group. And on that technical advisory group, it will be staffed by the land use jurisdictions. Those people will act as responsible liaisons to carry information back and forth between the technical advisory group and the jurisdiction. And those technical advisory group meetings will be open to all, both land use jurisdictions and members of the public. So to focus in even farther, we're going to look at the scope of the study. The scope of the study consists of these 4 points, and that is first identify the regulations, obligations, and constraints. It then gets into the detail and identifies what the different augmentation alternatives are for the remaining 973 of the project. It then goes through and we'll do a feasibility and economic analysis. We'll look at the cost-benefit analysis of each particular augmentation or possible mixes of augmentation alternatives. We'll also do a comparative analysis so that we have a good understanding of what we're looking at as far as what the possible projects could be. We will then have that information presented to the board, to this board, and the board will have the ability to assess that, look at the information, and then select a preferred opportunity. So there have been recent correspondence in the last couple of days. A separate party from the 3-party MOU has proposed changes to the MOU. Those changes are fairly redundant. The first change that was requested was non-interference with the Peninsula Desal project. I'd like to be clear that it has not been the policy of the FORA staff or FORA to get involved in that project, and so it's already existing policy to stay away from that. and will continue to support that project. The second thing that was requested was that TAG participation be inclusive of the Peninsula Water Authority. The reason that's redundant is the MOU already includes their particular members within the technical advisory group. And like we said, the TAG will be open to all public agencies and members of the public to participate who wish to attend. So today, we're asking that the FORA board consider this MOU. Both MCWD and PCA have signed it and have forwarded it on for this board's approval. And so we're asking you to take a look at that. In June, we will establish the technical advisory group. We will then use that group to collect information and get inputs, and then we'll prepare a request for proposal. We'll bring that RFP to the board for your review. And in September, we will select a consultant and begin the study, hopefully to follow the timeline and schedule that they present in their contract. So lastly, our recommendation of staff is that you authorize the executive officer to execute the three-party planning memorandum of understanding. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any member of the board have any questions? Yes, board member Kemp, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Thought it was on. My first question goes to the 2005 in the agenda report. There was a statement that desal was included as part of the plan at that time. What was the concept for desal in 2005?
Members of the board, the original project was known as the hybrid project, and an EIR was carried out at the time. It was a mix of recycled and desal, roughly 1,200 acre-feet apiece. That was the original version of this project back 10 years ago or so.
And the source water was going to come from?
I could add to what Steve mentioned, Mayor Camp. In 2005, you're talking about. 2005, there were 4 or 5 locations that were presented on maps that might be able to provide the source water. One of those would have been the MCWD overlay that it has on property along the beach, not far from 8th Street, where the former wastewater treatment plant from the Army was located. That was one option. Another option was MCWD's consideration of a desalination plant on its own property was another alternative. I think there were 2 or 3 other locations. Later on, part of that RUAP process, the board looked at becoming part of the regional project as another way to address that same item. So over the years, it's had different potential projects, but programmatically, it's an alternative that would get to 2,400.
Thank you. And I guess the other related question was there an issue in any way with water rights in terms of any element of that plan?
I'm not familiar with an issue relative to water rights, but it was in a fairly early planning stage at that point. And, you know, the recycled has been out in front, easier to study, the desal portion falling. And at the point of, you know, I forget the exact year, but let's just say 2009, that project was then superseded by the so-called regional project. And so the leadership on that was in a different venue. So I don't think they had ever completely settled on a particular site or any other aspect in that respect, but we can certainly research it further if there is a need.
Okay, and I guess the third part of my question, and it gets to the FORA policy on non-interference, and I would tell you my personal interest in this is that we do have a non-interference situation with the water supply project for the peninsula. Where is the language in the MOU that embeds the FORA policy on a non-interference basis?
I don't know specifically, maybe Keith can answer that question better, but It's the policy of this board on several occasions to make it very, very clear that the FORA water augmentation program is not in competition in any way with the Peninsula's program. And that's been stated by board direction on several occasions, and certainly I would assume reflected in the minutes of previous board meetings.
Thank you. And I'll reserve comment for later after public comment.
Thank you. Any other board member? Board Member Morton?
Yes, I wanted to know if the proposed changes appearing on the 3 slides back, those 2 proposed changes that you put forward, Peter, had been approved and were okayed or approved by the 2 other agencies in which we're entering into an MOU.
Those proposed changes were made by a party separate outside of the MOU negotiations. So they were neither put forward or agreed upon by the other 2 parties by MCWD or PCA.
Any other questions by board members? Seeing none, we'll go out to the public. Anyone in the public have any comments or questions relating to this item? Yes.
Excuse me, this is Ian Crooks with California American Water. My comment is in reference to the May 10th letter that you received from our attorney, Tony Lombardo, and that staff mentioned in their presentation about the 2 items that we believe belong in the MOU or should be considered. That is the explicit item about interference with the water supply project. And that should be considered in the MOU so that staff has clear direction in regards to evaluating options, and that the water supply project is considered and it prevents any future issue with an augmentation project for FORA. And the second item was the explicit request that the mayor's authority is a key member in the process under paragraph 3.5 of the MOU. I wanted to highlight again those 2 important items that we feel should be considered as part of the MOU. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public?
Yeah, Jan Schreiner. I'm sorry, I couldn't get your attention on the dais, so I'm speaking as a resident of Marina. And I appreciate that the previous speaker identified that the outside interest was CalAm, a corporation who serves the Monterey Peninsula. It was not clear in Attorney Lombardo's letter, and I would ask that that be clarified in the future, who the client is that is listed as a client by Lombardo. And 2, that the jurisdiction, land use jurisdiction, I don't believe the mayor's authority has a land use jurisdiction, but please clarify, and certainly not at the Ord community land use. So there's been a legal issue that I brought forward before as a resident of Marina, and many members of the board of FORA appear to sometimes represent their own land use rather than represent Ord community. And I have asked the chair and the attorney for FORA to make that clear, that when people need to recuse themselves or act as FORA members versus their own land use jurisdiction representation or their own water or wastewater services entity, such as Seaside County Sanitation District or as Mayor Water Authority people. So please, let's keep those rules straight. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public?
Rhinestone, Director for the Environmental Justice Network. This is the community-based organization that was set up to monitor and to be a voice for the community between all the agencies involved. And I'm concerned about the level of participation. Everybody that gets up, everybody who's coming in makes statements about the fact that, oh, we can participate. And from the Journal of the American Institute of Planners, it says, I participate, you participate, he participates, we participate, you participate, but they profit. And that's what we've been seeing happening in our community is other people prophecy, but they tell us we participate because we come to a meeting. Don't mean that any action has to be taken. We just show up and that means we participate. The heated controversy over citizen participation, citizen control, and maximum feasible involvement of the poor has been waged largely in terms of excavated rhetoric and misleading emphasis. We encourage a more enlightened dialogue. A typography of citizen participation is offered using examples from 3 federal social programs when renewal, anti-poverty, and model cities. The typography, which is designed to be provocative, is arranged in a ladder pattern with each rung corresponding to the extent of citizens' power in determining the plan and or the program. And the idea of citizen participation is a little like eating spinach. No one is against it in principle because it is good for you. Participation of the governed in their government is, in theory, the cornerstone of democracy, a revered idea that is vigorously applauded by virtually everyone. The applause is reduced to polite handshakes, though, and the participation level is very low. I keep seeing the same thing, and we're not addressing it in our communities.
Thank you, Ms. Stone. Anyone else in the public? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. We did have a question, 2 questions, I believe, from Board Member Schreiner as a resident. One was whether or not Mr. Lombardo was willing to disclose who his clients were. You know, really, I don't think attorney has to disclose that, and I'm throwing that question out. If someone wants to stand up and disclose who that is, that's fine. Second question was, is the Mayor's Association a land use jurisdiction? I think the answer to that is no. Anyone correct me on that?
That's correct.
Thank you. Someone said that's correct. I feel good. Okay. All right. I think those are the only 2 questions. I will entertain a motion on this particular item, please.
Second.
Been moved by Board Member Pendergast and seconded by Board Member Rubio. Slowing down there. Hey.
By request.
Any other comments on this matter? Board Member Kemp and Board Member Edelin.
I would like to check with our attorney for FORA. My understanding is that all of us who are here as voting members are here because of our mutual interest in the regional impacts of any of the work that's done by FORA. And that's the basis on which we are participating in this board and representing our jurisdictions. Is that inappropriate? And
your understanding is absolutely correct.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to check. And so for comment on this particular issue, I absolutely support the idea that the augmented water is important to the future of FORA. I have no qualms whatsoever with that concept and the intent of this particular MOU. What I do have some trouble with is that while it's FORA policy to have a non-interference approach, there are 2 other parties to this MOU, and those parties have not made the same commitments as far as I know. If they have, I would like to learn more about it, but that would be the reservation I have. And in that sense, I think the letter that we received from Tony Lombardo, and it's a topic I brought up the last time I sat here as an alternate, is where's the language that really embodies this in the MOU? I don't know that it's something that would cause me not to vote for this time around, but I feel it's truly a concern and a legitimate one on this particular topic. And do we have any evidence from the other parties that they are also committed to the same objective, that we ought to be able to find plenty of augmented water for all of the interested parties on this peninsula?
Board Member Blumart, can you, or Executive Officer Blumart, could you answer that, please?
This particular process is only to serve the former Fort Ord, and this is controlled by this board as well as the other two boards. So I do not believe that you could have something that would escape this board without your knowledge.
Thank you.
Board Member Edelin, then Board Member Rubio.
I really appreciate Mr. Lombardo Esquire, his letter. He normally has a lot of great ideas for us to consider as part of this board. In this case, I think coming up with a non-interference clause for this board is excessive. Just the term non-interference, I could see a room full of lawyers trying to determine what is interference, what is not interference. I think we all agree that we're not going to be interfering with the Peninsula Water Supply Project. Now, the other two organizations, Marina Coast Water District, MRWPCA, they have their own priorities. They may or may not try to interfere, but I think this is a great idea. We've got three agencies coming together, saving money, preventing duplication of effort on a single project. We can all get together to try to force them to do something they feel may or may not be in their best interest, would only be detrimental to our own interests here. If the other two entities do try to interfere with the Monterey Peninsula authority there are other ways that the authority can, let's say, not retaliate, I don't want to use that strong term, but take action to ensure it doesn't occur.
Thank you. Board Member Rubio.
Yes, so that everyone's clear, the MRWPCA is a part of the Peninsula Project. So it doesn't make sense that they would turn on themselves and go against what's good for the project. And we have the policy here, and several of the representatives here are from the peninsula and are dependent on that project to have economic success. So I think there are safeguards just embedded in the boards that are involved. The MOU is really important for us to consider the completion of our augmentation on the former Fort Ord, which is an entirely different water basin, zone C2 of the Salinas Valley water aquifer. So we can't move water across the borders, but we can definitely work together to try to accomplish projects of mutual benefit. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments from board members, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passed unanimously. Thank you. We will now go to 6D, consider resolution adopting Marina Coast Water District's 2016-17 compensation plan. And I'm reading from the staff report on this matter, and I read as follows. The Fort Ord Reuse Authority's responsibility is to state whether it agrees or disagrees with MCWD's proposed budget within 3 months of receiving the proposed budget and plan. If there is a need for a second vote, it will be coming on June 10th, which would be the last of the 90 days, just for the purpose of everyone being informed. Yes. Michael, are you to? Go ahead.
Thank you, board members, again.
Peter, please.
So what I'm going to do is run through a little bit of this particular item. A little of the back history. 1998 facilities agreement, the wastewater facilities agreement is assigned roles and responsibilities. MCWD is to report the Ord community revenues and expenses to the Wastewater Oversight Committee. The WWOC reviews those budgets, compensation plans, both yearly and quarterly, and then recommends and reports that to the FORA board. FORA board has 3 months from the time of receipt, and in this case it was March 10th, to adopt the compensation plan, or rather to approve or disapprove of the compensation plan. So a little bit of the background here. In February, the WWOC reviewed MCWD's 5-year capital improvement program as part of pre-proposed budget review. They were able to look at what capital improvements MCWD was proposing over the next 5 years. On March 10th, we received the WWC received the proposed Ord community compensation plan, and then proceeded on March 16th, April 8th, and on a special meeting of May 2nd to review that plan in detail. The members asked of MCWD a number of questions, such as what were the actual proposed budgets? What were the actual versus proposed budgets of capital improvements? How developer fees were related to capacity fees? How allocation of water and sewage percentages between Ord and Marina are determined? How the Proposition 218 rate increases tie to the capital improvement program? And if any line items are used to pay for prior legal fees, of which there were none. MCWD adequately answered all those questions for the WWOC, and the WWOC voted unanimously 5-0 to recommend adoption of the Ord community budget or the compensation plan with no change to the capital charges. And they also asked that we, as a friendly addendum, add the following note for the board's consideration. The note reads as such: the rate increases, forgive me for reading off of a PowerPoint presentation, but the rate increases authorized by the Proposition 218 process are scheduled over a 5-year period from the start of 2014 to the end of 2018. The increases over this term are required to cover specific capital improvement projects and operating costs. The improvements yet to be completed are provided in the draft 5-year plan, which is attached in your packet, and they include, and I have a timeline and a schedule here for you, the Clark and Giggling lift station and force main, which is a sewer upgrade. That should happen between 16 and 18. Inter-garrison pipeline upsizing and the light fighter extension, also scheduled to happen between 16 and 18. The demolition of the D-zone reservoir, which is going to happen between 17 and the 2020. Eastside Parkway D-zone pipeline to connect that reservoir down to other parts of Marina. And that's the east side, that's between 17 and 18. The SCSD improvements for Delray Oaks, the South Boundary Road pipeline, and improvements, including minor improvements at the Seaside Resort, the dunes, and at CSUMB. And that partially has to do with some of the laterals that need to be built and whatnot. So those are the capital improvements that are tied to the Proposition 218 rate increases, and the WWC wanted the board to understand that connection. So a little bit of the ground rules behind the facilities agreement, and this is just to provide some clarity on what that agreement has in it. FORA is supposed to respond within 3 months of the receipt of the proposed budget. We received that March 10th. MCWD, if FORA does not make a ruling, then the last submitted compensation plan, which was presented to us, can be deemed as adopted. That's under section 7.21. MCWD can default to the previous year's budget, 15-16, and initiate a dispute resolution if the budget's not approved. Now, if the FORA board doesn't approve the budget, they have to, according to the facilities agreement, identify specific line items in the budget for dispute. They must provide specific reasons for the denial, and they also must provide specific remedies. All of this comes out of the facilities agreement. And lastly, section 10.1 and 5.4 govern how a budget dispute happens. First, the executive officer of FORA and the MCWD general manager have 10 days and have been authorized to negotiate a solution. Then, if it's not resolved in 10 days, the WWC has 10 days to resolve it. If not, then a voting member from each board has 10 days to resolve it. And finally, it's handed over to a Monterey County judge for mediation. Forgive me for this facilities agreement review, but we thought it'd be good to at least address the process that the budget review has to go through. So with that, we would bring forward to the board to consider the resolutions brought in the packet to adopt a compensation plan for base-wide water and sewer services on the former Fort Ord. I would like to note that the second resolution is for capital charges, and there have been no changes in the capital charges. The resolution is a matter of formality, so that it's not a matter of formality. I believe it's something MCWD needs to have to move forward. So that's the recommendation from FORA staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of any board members? Board Member Morton.
So I understand, because we went through this last year extensively, the 218 process covered the rate increase for the receivers of this service, correct, for MCWD water service? Is that
No,
what
I'm
your
gonna hand
reference?
that-
Your reference in your slideshow
Oh, the Prop 218,
was 5 years for rate increases to the purveyors of water, to the users of this water, and over a 5-year period. And because that happened, it's now a proposed increase of 10% this year?
no, according to the Prop 218 process, I think in 2013-14, they set the rate increases for the next 5 years.
That's what I'm
We're currently in the
asking.
middle of that. Those rate increases, the monies collected from those rate increases are applied to capital improvement projects, those of which are listed for you.
Right. So what I'm trying to indicate, find out to get confirmation, is the 10% rate increase is not within the discretion of this board because of the Prop 218 process. Is that, trying to make
That is
sure
correct.
the public hears this?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Any other board members? Thank you. Go out to the public. Any member of the public?
Good afternoon, Tom Mancini. Sorry I missed the 90-day deadline, but on page 5 of your packet there, no, page 81, the Marina Coast Water District indicates that the average bill will be in the vicinity of $90 and plus $29 for the sewer. Last year, I was able to get access to a number of water bills, in particular Pueblo Del Mar, which is a nonprofit. They've got about 58 buildings, and I noticed we have 1 meter. I'll read them off to you. There were 14 bills. 2 were for other than dwelling units. There were 4 bills for triplexes. There were 8 bills for fourplexes. In other words, 32 buildings and 12 buildings. And so I divided the 12 bills by the amount of money. Those 12 dwelling units paid over $26.54 a month. That comes out of the Monterey County Housing Authority, pays them, or an average of $60.33 a dwelling unit. Then I did a little bit more research, and I added all of the units together, and it came to 89 units for 7.41 units per service address. We should be advised that a service address is a meter. And CSUMB has a number of sixplexes out there. There's 3 meters per the sixplexes. And so all over the former FORA, the majority of duplexes only have 1 meter. As in the example of Veterans Transition Center has 40 units, but they only got 20 meters. So I think that you need to take a number of, Marina Coast and Water District needs to go back. It's too late now, probably. But, and revised and actually report what the amount of water actually being used per dwelling unit, not per account. As an example, there are 380 homes in Seaside Highlands. The consumption for 2014 was 147 acre-feet per year, or 12.25 acre-feet per month. That comes to approximately 10,000 gallons, or 13.9 cubic feet, or 1.39 hundred cubic feet, or I'll round it up to 2.2 units per month for an average. So how can you sit there and say that the average customer is going to use?
Your 3 minutes are up.
It's charged, so they need to report
Thank you.
accurately what was used.
Anyone else in the public?
Rhinestone Photo and Environmental Justice Network. There's a lot of building going on, businesses, housing, a lot of pretty stuff happening, and we know it needs water. So the ratepayers, the local community, is being priced out. And if you walk around and look at the houses or the rental units in the local community, it looks like a desert. There's nothing beautiful about it. So what we see that is happening is the rates are going up on the water while it's being used for all the commercial developments and $500,000 houses that are being built, and it's pricing the local people out of their community. And that is well known, and nobody talks about it. Nobody wants to hear about it. I'm talking about it. We need to take another method and look at these processes.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public? Seeing none, we'll close public comment, bring it back for entertain a motion. It's been moved by Board Member Rubio and seconded by Board Member Edelin. Any brief comments on this matter?
Yes.
Board Member, let's go Oglesby was.
Go ahead.
Unless he wants to be.
I just wanted to say I appreciate Director Morton's comments because myself, I did try to stop this last year, a couple years ago, but the 218 process, a little shaky, but it went through according to Marina Coast. And so this vote is not FORA is not voting on the increase, as we're voting on the budget itself. So I want to be clear for the public. I do not support the increase, but this is the budget. And we need to move their budget forward. I think it's enough votes to move this, so why delay it till June 10th? But I just want to be clear, we're not supporting the water increase rates.
Thank you. Board Member Morton?
Yes, Director Oglesby's fairly clearly stated what my position is as well. We do understand from the speakers today, speakers in the past, that the cost on our local constituents using this water is extraordinarily high. We have many of the low-income affordable housing that are paying $84 before they even turn on the water and use any water. 10% of an increase is even adding to that burden. How that is structured is not before this board, so we're only approving the budget, but I do want to make that clear to the public.
Thank you. Board Member Edelin.
I think this is a good budget, and I think this board will end up approving it. I think it's a good example of our supporting the Marina Coast Water District and a gesture of good faith. And I would just hope in the future the Marina Coast Water District will support this agency and other agencies and authorities in the future, and we'll work together instead of working against one another.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Oh, I'm sorry. Board Member Parker.
I just wanted to make a comment that I do have concerns about the size of the increase. As has been said, we don't get to apparently do anything about that. But I think perhaps a partial solution or something that we can do is to focus on the process for Fort Ord residents to be able to vote for the Marina Coast District board members, and partly too because Fort Ord Reuse Authority has really been the only place where the Ord community could come and even hope to be heard. And with FORA moving towards a sunset, I think it might be a good time for FORA staff to maybe bring back in June or July sort of a progress report on where the annexation process is for that, so that we can maybe keep track of that process, and if there's anything we can do to help it along. And maybe when you bring the report, just look at what the obstacles seem to be, so we have a sense for if there's a constructive way that we might engage.
Thank you. I think our executive officers made note of that request. Any other comments, any other remarks relating to this item by the board? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Could you mark this date down, please?
Friday the 13th.
Wow, I've been on this board a long time, not as long as many of you, but wow, okay. Quick, before someone says reconsider. Let's go to 6C, review consultant determination, opinion report relating to categories 1 and 2, post reassessment actions. This is an opinion report that's being submitted. Jonathan, are you proceeding first? Thank you.
Chair O'Connell, members of the board, I just want to first mention here a little context. Then shortly, Ted Lopez, Associate Planner at FORA, will present this item along with the consultant team, Michael Baker International. So just a little context on categories 1 and 2 determination opinion report. Back in 1997, after the FORA board adopted the base reuse plan, there was a lawsuit with the Sierra Club, and so that ended in a settlement agreement, which also ended up with the FORA board adopting Chapter 8 into the master resolution. And part of that master resolution, Chapter 8, included a reassessment report, which was completed and approved by the FORA board in December 2012. After that report was received by the board, the board had a number of workshops to look at the different categories of categories 1 through 5. And categories 1 and 2, category 1 is the base reuse plan corrections and updates, and category 2 were prior board actions and regional plan consistency. So the board in those workshops requested that staff hire a special land use attorney, and FORA retained Alan Waltner for a couple of legal opinions on those categories. Essentially, those legal opinions said FORA would benefit from a CEQA practitioner looking at categories 1 and 2 in more detail. And so that is where I will drop off, and Ted will pick up on the reports of the board.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Jonathan. My one slide is the extent the FORA staff had conducted a very, very extensive selection process to hire a consultant to review and conduct an environmental analysis for categories 1 and 2. What came up was, of course, Michael Baker International, and part of their process was, again, to look at categories 1 and 2. And also, what they have found is that they've reconfirmed what staff had previously understood, and also what Special Legal Counsel Alan Waltner had come up with and developed. And at this point, I want to introduce the consultants that have done a very, very extensive and very professional and critical review of these issues. Today, to speak in more detail is Darcy Kremen, who's the project manager for Michael Baker International, and also here is Ms. Amanda Monchap, Esquire from Holland and Knight, also did a legal analysis of that. So I'm going to turn it over to Darcy.
Thank you, Ted.
Thanks, Ted. So we were hired to look at these two categories for the base reassessment report and come up with our opinion. So a determination opinion isn't necessarily a CEQA term. You won't find it in the CEQA guidelines, but it's just from our analysis as CEQA experts, this is what we determined. So we wrote it up in a memo for you and broke it down into the two categories. For category 1, you'll see a little graphic on the side, but the reassessment report basically had a table, right, of all the things that needed to be changed, and it was mostly errata, right, and in corrections. Right after the reassessment report came out, the public and FORA staff identified additional errata, but basically these have no material effect on the purpose, intent, or guidance of the base plan. They're typos, grammar, references, changes, and it's not a project under CEQA. We can actually prepare an errata and be done with it for category 1. So no CEQA required for category 1. Category 2 is a little different matter, but basically what we found with all of the category 2 changes from the base reassessment report, that they fell into two categories. They were either not a project under CEQA, or perhaps exempt from CEQA, or they were previously approved under CEQA or are undergoing CEQA from the member agencies. The things that were not a project under CEQA or exempt from CEQA, the designation of the national monument, not a project. The memorandum of agreement for Imjin Parkway, not a project under CEQA. Also, the air quality management plan and the water quality management plan. These aren't projects under CEQA for purposes of what the FORA board needs to do with the base reuse plan. And everything else was previously approved. So Delray Oaks, their general plan underwent CEQA. They had an EIR. Marina also had an EIR for their general plan. Seaside had a general plan EIR, as well as the city of Monterey and the county. So they've all received CEQA for their land use changes under those documents. Last things we looked at were the adjusted roadway improvements of General Jim Moore Boulevard and 2nd Avenue. It's previously approved. And also the TAMC RTP that was in the base reassessment report, which was now been predated because it's too old. But again, it was previously assessed under CEQA. So our next steps from our scope of work are to now incorporate these land use changes and update the maps and just bring them up to current status of all the land use designation changes that have happened since the base plan was done in 2007, I believe, right? Or 1997. So there's a lot of changes. But other than that, there's no additional CEQA or board action that's needed for categories 1 and 2. Questions?
Any board member have any questions? Board member Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I would like to understand, I know that the Post-Reassessment Advisory Committee on which I sit went through a lot of the Category 1 and really went through that with a fine-tooth comb. And I think those recommended changes were brought to this board for approval and adoption and incorporation into an updated plan. So I guess my question is, our staff report says that the FORA staff working with Michael Baker will complete category 1 and 2 work tasks as appropriate, including text and figure corrections and updates. So is that going to follow a process where the staff will work with you to kind of lay out what it would all look like, and then would it come through the PRAC before coming back to this board? I'm trying to get the process.
That's a good question.
The plan was to bring it back to the board and get your feedback. And if you receive the report, then the PRAC, as a lot of you will remember, spent very late night meetings going through every single diagram and every single page. And so all of the category 1 items would presumably not be going back to the PRAC to go through that kind of process again. The category 2 items were originally sent to the legal counsel, Mr. Waltner, and went through a different process and was reported back to this board. I forget the exact time frame. And so this is meant to be the end of the work plan item, that the board would sign off on that, and the consultant could do their work. And then we would bring the completed item out similar to how we do the capital improvement program after you approve it.
Right, can I just, I'm still not exactly clear. So I get it that category 1 doesn't need to go back through PRAC because we've been there, done that. But category 2, as the changes are made or whatever updates need to be done to accurately reflect previous board actions, will those, as staff goes through and dots the I's and crosses the T's or moves things around, that will come back to this board for review and approval. Is that correct?
We can design a process of bringing it back to you. What the consultant is saying is there's no need for approval because there's no project under CEQA. So it's not, it's unclear as to how we could frame it, but we could bring it back for you to accept the report or in some manner that is satisfactory.
So I will just by saying I would be concerned if it did not come back to this board for some sort of final review and adoption or approval or whatever we do, because there have been times when staff have gone and perhaps with good intentions changed some things that really made some serious changes that really almost got us into some legal problems. So I just don't want to put the staff in the position of doing that and not having this board have the opportunity to either correct it or sign off on whatever has been done.
Thank you. Board Member Morton and Board Member Ochoa.
Yeah, so Mr. Ensley, you just said something very different than what our consultant said. And that's the difficulty that I had in reading this and in reading what action is being taken. The consultant has given us their opinion that none of these actions require further CEQA review. That is the sole point of their evaluation. They have not gone further to say that no action needs to be taken in how the language, the maps, how we reflect past board actions in the base reuse plan. And to Director Parker's comment, when the question is, how does it come back that when you are interdelineating changes in the policy, in maps, how does this board look at that and review that? Since we have reviewed even the most ministerial changes, what's the process? Because that's not what your consultants have done.
Steve or Darcy?
We can design a process that the board directs us to bring back the final product, and we can frame it in an appropriate motion, I think is the way we would do that. The reason that we weren't thinking in terms of just bringing the entire base reuse plan back after the corrections in errata and other elements are updated, that would be like approving the reuse plan all over again. So what I interpret them as saying is that we did it once, we don't have to do it a second time. But I clearly understand that there's got to be transparency in this process. So we can design a way of doing that. You'll see every single keystroke.
And I would second that. CRAC would be the place to review that. We did that previously.
Thank you. Board Member Ochoa, this is time for questions, and then we will go out to the public.
I had a question about the conclusion from the consultant's report, which seems to characterize these two categories of changes as either past actions by FORA and as past actions by FORA and local land use agencies, and then proceeds to say this is comparable to sort of modifying our reuse plans to memorialize some of those past actions and changes, and then concludes that this is the whole thing seems to be described as an administrative exercise necessary to memorialize the changes in one place. The implication being that all these changes, all these decisions have been made by FORA over time. So if we are simply modifying a text to reflect past actions, I'm wondering whether it's really necessary to create an elaborate committee and full board review of this process, as opposed to, the question is, could we just receive the report? And then if there's if somebody spots it with an eagle eye, there's something wrong, that could be brought up. But otherwise, receive the report, could that do it?
I would think so. I would think at the time when we get to make a motion, there'll probably be a motion either to accept it the way it is or to bring it back at a future CRAC or board meeting. But we'll see when we get the time to make the motions. Good points, though. Any other questions by board members? Board Member Rubio.
So basically, Dr. Ochoa asked the same question I was going to ask in regards to, do we receive this report today? And since we're saying, yes, we got the report, we understand that, what's going on in the report. And if it's determined at a subsequent date that there's some other further action that we could take, then we do it then.
Thank you. Executive Officer or Steve, could either one of you answer that as to Board Member Ochoa as well as Board Member Rubio's question relating to the process to bring it back, and to whom?
Well, I think that what they were saying was that it would be a perfectly acceptable process to simply accept the report today and acknowledge that it has been received. Then the consultant does their work, and then what will emerge from that will be product, and then we'll make sure that that product is made available to the board, to the public, to everybody, so that it's very clear what the end result is. And then if there is a desire to bring it back in some sort of venue, depending on what this board decides, it can go to a committee process, it can come back to the board, or it can be reviewed in any particular manner that you want to do. But my comments were just simply that you don't want to bring back all of the changes that the consultant is saying you already voted on and made when you did your consistency determinations and create a double jeopardy situation. But I also see very clearly that it's a huge document and there's lots of elements to it, so we don't want to just hide it from anybody. So there's a process that we can develop that will make it very open and available to anyone who wants to see the work product.
Thank you. Seeing no other board questions, we'll go out to the public. Anyone in the public have any questions or comments relating to this item?
Rhinestone Photo and Environmental Justice Network. FORA is a public entity that was set up to help the local community to do what needed to be done in their community as far as job development, health, housing, and whatever. That is not happening. And I wonder why CEQA is not involved. I didn't get a definition either. And everybody keeps saying the public did this and the public did that. We don't have a good definition of who the public is, because anybody that comes along is not a public or should not be a decision maker in what is happening in our community, while the people who should be helping to make decisions, like us, are not really included. These things have gone on really without really any real dialogue from us. We didn't help to hire any contractors, pick them out, say what we wanted them to do. We participate in a few workshops. We don't even know where that's gone. And then what is an errata? You said that the public identified erratas, and I don't know what that is. And I wish that a language would be spoken where we can understand, hear what is being said, because we have not been included. And I think it's a big legal action that we have not really been included in these decisions that have been made all around us.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public?
Michael Salerno, Keep Fort Ord Wild. So the action in front of the board, can I take this off? So the action in front of the board today is to receive the report, and I would urge the board not to receive the report for a number of reasons, but the ones I'm going to highlight, there's some glaring factual inconsistencies in the report. For example, I direct you to page 5 of the memo towards the top. There's a paragraph where it says, FORA has not yet analyzed the Monterey County General Plan for consistency with the base reuse plan. Yes, it did. In 2014, most of the board was here when that happened, and in fact, the FORA board found the two plans inconsistent. Further down, here's another example. Further down on that page, there's a heading about the East Garrison Parker Flats land swap. It identifies it as a previously approved project under CEQA. That's not correct. What I'd also like to point out in terms of the Category 2 changes, if you take, again, the land swap, for example, if you actually look at the document, there's a laundry list of conditions that were placed on the land swap because there were 5 parties involved. If you compare that with the reassessment report, those conditions are not in there. So the issue of staff potentially, either with good intentions or not, cherry picking certain conditions in a document like that. So there's a whole host of issues. I would urge the board not to accept the report and go back to the drawing board. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member of the public?
Name is Eric Peterson, and since General Jim Moore Boulevard was mentioned, just a comment that it would be really nice and safer if General Jim Moore Boulevard were brought into compliance with the Caltrans Highway Design Manual. It would be simple, easy, quick, and as I say, safer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, members of the board. Chair Molly Erickson, on behalf of Stamp Erickson, here speaking on behalf of Keep Forward Wild. I urge you not to accept the report before you today. You've heard some very valid concerns from some of your board members about the process. You've heard some very valid concerns from Michael Salerno with Keep Forward Wild, that in fact there are factual misrepresentations in the report that you are being asked to accept today. That's very unwise. Let's do a brief overview of categories 1 and 2. 6, almost half of the board sitting today was not present in 2012 when the reassessment report identified categories 1 and 2. In fact, the land swap, as Mr. Solano mentioned, had no consistency determination, but you're being, and no CEQA. So you're being asked today to just add it, have staff administratively add it. And the reassessment report admits that there was no consistency determination for the land swap. That's on page 3-74 of the reassessment report. As to the Fort Ord Master Plan and the County of Monterey General Plan, that also was not deemed consistent by the FORA board. Dr. Ochoa raised a very interesting additional point with regard to the claim in the staff report that these are documents that are essentially as good as an amendment of the reuse plan. That's a claim in the report, but that's not accurate, unfortunately. You can't rely on it because there are MOAs, memorandums of agreement, there are contracts, and there's other unspoken policies which may or may not be written that you are being asked to now amend the reuse plan with. These lower level documents, these MOAs, these contracts, they are not amendments to the reuse plan. They do not, under the doctrine of equal dignities, which is a wonderfully named legal doctrine, they are not of the same level of importance. It's kind of like amending an ordinance with a resolution. As you board and council members and supervisors know, you cannot do that. You can only amend an ordinance with another ordinance. 2 documents of equal dignities. What you are being asked here is to take written contracts and MOAs and amend the reuse plan, which is essentially the constitution of the FORA. Specifically, though, I'd like to say also 2 other plans with the Delray Oaks and Monterey amendments. With all respect to Delray Oaks and Monterey, they did go through those city processes, but they were not necessarily deemed consistent because the reuse plan at a later place, at a different place, says that Delray Oaks and Monterey have no policies under the reuse plan. No policies. Specifically, it says no reuse plan policies are written to include Delray Oaks and Monterey. Why? Because at the time the reuse plan was prepared, they were not identified to receive property. But they did receive property, but they never got policies and programs assigned to them. So the reassessment report says, FORA assumes that the Monterey County policies applicable to the present Delray Oaks and Monterey territories remain applicable in those areas. An assumption does not
Okay, I'm sorry, your 3 minutes are up.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We urge you to reject the report.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public? Seeing no other public members, we'll bring it back to the board or entertain a motion on this matter.
Move staff recommendation.
It's been moved and seconded to accept the staff recommendation. The second is Mayor Rubio. Anyone else?
Staff recommendation.
Accept the report.
Accepting the opinion report. Hold on one second.
So I'd like to make a friendly amendment that the report is an opinion is being asked to be accepted by the mover. Is that correct? As an opinion about CEQA.
I'm moving that we accept the Michael Baker International determination opinion of categories 1 and 2 report.
And I would make a friendly amendment that that any changes in the base reuse plan go through the PRAC review, as did category 1 for category 2.
I appreciate your concern. However, all we're doing is talking about accepting this report, not changes.
Board Member Edelin,
yes.
Do you accept the friendly amendment or not?
No.
Okay. Is there any substitute motion? Okay, seeing that, any comments on this motion and second? Mayor Rubio.
Yes, I'd just like to ask a question of the consultant. In regards to the land swap, because that's the one thing that stood out in my mind about it not undergoing a CEQA process. Can you address that, please?
Yes, and Amanda's going to help me because it's complicated. I want you to start.
Sure. So the land swap that was done with an MOU, at the time, the case law was that the MOU wasn't subject to CEQA as an MOU. It actually has some binding language, but the effect of the MOU is to change hands of parcels. That has all been completed. So it is an action that is actually already passed. And as such, it was not challenged. It stands. The land has been exchanged. There was a comment that there were some conditions. Those conditions were part of the exchange of the land. It's essentially an action that is done, taken. There's nothing left to review. You're updating your document to reflect what was approved by the agencies through an MOU and an action that has already been complete.
Thank you. And let me, before we do anything else, I apologize. Ms. Stone had asked two questions. Executive Officer, could you address it? One was the why is CEQA not involved? I think that has been answered by the presentation a couple of times today. And then there was the other question.
Yeah, Angela Stone had a question about the term errata, that we have a tendency to speak in these kinds of acronyms and technical jargon from time to time. And errata simply means that there were, as was pointed out by staff, either T's not crossed or I's not dotted in a more colloquial sense, but to be more precise, there were places where the names of roads on maps were the wrong name and it needed to be corrected. So that kind of errata was done to correct inaccuracies. Yes, they're Ms. Stone, if you would mind, come by the office, we can show you every single one of them.
And
Okay.
they are listed in the.
This is time for comments, not further questions. And I should have punched I should have punched Mayor Rubio something for sneaking in a question there. But anyhow, comment. Board
Well,
member.
I have a question because it was raised by the public comment, and I would like our consultant to answer. It's something that was raised.
Okay, if there's no objection by any board member, go ahead, please.
On page 5 of your report, it says the base reuse plan changes to reflect the Monterey County general plan are considered administrative. We have not approved the general plan for Monterey County as being consistent. So why would a consistency with that plan be administrative when as a board it was rejected?
Well, that was one of our famous 6-6 votes. So the general plan came forward, and a motion to find it consistent ended up tied 6-6. So it was sent back to the county without prejudice. But none of the items that are Category 2 items depend on that general plan. So it would be future projects, entitlements that come forward, or specific plans, they would depend on that general plan ultimately coming back for a consistency determination. So that's why they would come up with that language, although they can explain better for themselves. But that is the reason.
Thank you. People are going to abuse this now because it was one exception. Yes, Mayor Kemp, please.
Thank you. And I don't know if it's an exception to go back and ask questions, but there were a couple of assertions made by the public of substantial factual errors. I don't have firsthand knowledge. It seems to me before we blow by that and take a vote on this issue, we should get a comment from someone who knows something about it to set our minds at ease that we believe it was properly represented, or that we do have questions we need to answer before we're prepared to take action. And that was the request.
I see, okay.
Through the chair.
Sure. If there's a executive officer, you want to respond to the comments that were made in public? Comment?
And I'm sorry I didn't write down exactly what the objections are. One had to do with the land swap. That may have been answered just a moment ago. I think it was. But there was another one as well. There was also the question
I think it was
MOUs versus ordinances versus general plans.
I think it was regarding the analysis of whether the Monterey County General Plan had been analyzed for consistency in the past. I think that was the allegation that it was incorrect. The report was incorrect. And I think that has just been addressed by Steve.
There was a third one. I believe there was one about City of Monterey and City of Del Rio general plans. So, I mean, essentially, when the base use plan was adopted in 1997, cities of Del Rio and Monterey had not annexed Fort Ord. So the question was, I think, just putting it into question about whether the policies that exist in the base use plan that pertain to those particular parcels would also apply to those cities. And so that's actually in the reassessment report in category 4. It's not a category 2 item. So it's not within the purview of categories 1 and 2.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Well, before the last
Board Member
comment.
Oglesby just said this is the last comment, so,
Well, I'm sure the supervisor wants to go. No, my comment is I appreciate Director Kemp because that's my thinking. When we have direct challenges to what we're doing, then it's our obligation to pull back up our attorneys and that consultant and say, no, that the public may not be correct. We shouldn't just blow by it. I'm comfortable with the consultant and what our lawyer has to say, but I do think we need to answer some of the questions. So before we close, I would appreciate the executive director framing it up again about the foundation we do have for accepting this. You know, we pay for a consultant, we pay for a lawyer. I think they know what they're doing. So before we're done, maybe you want to come back around and after everybody else asks their questions.
any other comments? Any other questions?
Chair, just a clarifying question. In the motion as it stands, so the amendment wasn't accepted.
Correct.
So as the motion stands now, what is the mechanism by which these the work tasks that FORA staff together with the consultant when they undertake those work tasks and make those corrections and updates, what's the process for it to come back to this board or through a committee or not?
Let me ask the motion maker, is it your desire to have this to come back to the board or to come back to PRAC or to not?
I'd like to keep it simple. The motion was just about accepting the report as part of the actual body of the report itself. It does talk about the FORA staff working with MBI to complete Category 1. I don't really care per se. If somebody else wants to make a motion after my motion is voted on, I'd be more than happy to entertain that. The motion stands.
Yes, I understand. I understand that we've tried the friendly amendment that didn't, excuse me, we've tried the friendly amendment, did not work. Is there a substitute motion?
I'll give a try to a substitute motion. I move that we accept, we receive the opinion of Michael Baker International on categories 1 and 2, and that any of the corrections, updates, or changes that are made, particularly to category 2, come back to this board for review and adoption and approval, and that a mechanism to be considered might be that for thorough review that it go through the PRAC.
Okay, the motion's been made by Board Member Parker and seconded by Board Member Potter. Is there any comments on the substitute motion? Mayor Rubio.
To the maker of the motion, does that include issues that have already been voted on by this board? She said changes.
Which can be, some of them are in category 2. Right, so.
Excuse me, that's my question. If you're going to review everything, are we going to review things and adopt again things that have already been done by this board?
Through the chair, the idea is to ensure that whatever corrections have been made are accurate.
Chair, could I insert a quick suggestion that instead of approve, adopt, that we either use the word receive or confirm?
Gee, what was simple is now complicated. We have a substitute motion. We have a second and a substitute motion. Is there any comments on this substitute motion? One more comment, please. Board Member Redlin.
I'm only afraid that we're taking a very simple process. We're making a bureaucratic nightmare of going back to the PRAC. The PRAC has spent hundreds of hours on this, reviewing this, and it's going to come back before us again. We're creating a mess right now, and it appears to be another way of that may be considered to be delaying. The longer it can be delayed, the less time we have of implementation. This organization basically goes out of business in 2020. We can't afford to delay anymore. We need to get this behind us. We've got the categories 3 and 4 to go through. If we delay this much more, we're not going to get anything done. So I'm going to be voting against this. I'd like to just keep it simple, go with staff recommendation.
Thank you. Let's yes.
Yes, I did say receive the opinion, and I think the controversy is what is the action that the board is going to take when it comes back to us for review? Are we going to confirm something? Are we going to? Well, it's going to come back to this board for some sort of action.
If the substitute motion passes.
Right.
Okay. In the substitute motion, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. I think we better have a roll call. Why not? Nothing else on a Friday, why not? Yes, I was, you know?
And Ms. Parker, I'm going to repeat your motion just to make sure I have it correctly. On a substitute motion made by Supervisor Parker, she has requested that the wording be to receive the opinion letter in Category 1 and Category 2 provided by MBI, and any corrections - changes to Category 2 specifically come to the board for review and adoption - approval, and that a mechanism to be followed will be through PRAC, seconded by Supervisor Potter.
And I think the what it should say is to come back to this board for review and possible action. We don't got all tangled up in whether it's adopting or approving. So, and then the vehicle of using the PRAC for more in-depth review is an option.
Is that acceptable to the second? Great. I asked for the roll call, so let's go with the roll
Okay.
call.
Let's begin with Mayor for City of Carmel, Caracano,
Yes.
Mayor Edelin, Vice Mayor Huffa, no, Mr. Dallas. He's gone?
Smith.
Oh, Smith, I'm so sorry. This is an old sheet. Smith? No. Mayor Gunter, he's already gone. Mayor Kemp. Councilmember Morton. Mayor Pro Tem Oglesby.
No.
Supervisor Parker. Mayor Pendergrass.
No.
Supervisor Phillips. Supervisor Potter. And Mayor Rubio.
The substitute motion fails.
It fails, yes.
And we'll now go to the motion itself made by Board Member Edelin. I think it was seconded an hour and a half ago by Board Member Rubio. All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? 2 noes, Board Member Morton and Board Member Parker. Thank you for your patience. Let us go to public comments on matters not on the agenda. Anyone present who has a desire to make a public comment on a matter not on the agenda, you will have up to 3 minutes. If you're going to speak as a board member between each other, turn off your mic, please.
Rhinestone Photo and Environmental Justice Network. I'm still talking about citizen participation.
Please, people, give the speaker respect that she deserves.
Citizen participation is citizen power. Because the question has been a bone of political contention, most of the answers have been purposely buried in innocuous emphasis like self-help or citizen involvement. Still others have been embellished with misleading rhetoric like absolute control, which is something no one, including the President of the United States, has or can have. Between understand, emphasis, and exaggerated rhetoric, even scholars have found it difficult to follow the controversy to the headline reading public. It is simply bewildering. My answer to the critical what question is simply that citizen participation is a categorical term for citizen power. It is the redistribution of power that enables the have-not citizens presently excluded from the political and economic processes to be deliberately included in the future. It is a strategy by which the have-nots join in determining how information is shared, goals and policies are set, as resources, how resources are allocated, programs are operated, and benefits like contracts and patronage are parceled out. In short, it is the means by which they can induce significant social reform, which enables them to share in the benefits of the affluent society. We need to look at these things right now here in our community, and it's been long enough.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public on matters not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll close public comment and we will go to the executive officer's report on several information items only.
I have nothing to add, Chair.
That was quick. Please make note that Board Member Parker had asked for an update relating to the possible annexation that we could bring back. I know you're all disappointed, but I will not be here at the next meeting. So please be nice to Mayor Rubio. He will be chairing the meeting. I'll miss you greatly. Have a nice weekend. Thank you. We're adjourned.